In this video, we're going to talk about the reports that you as managers should run every day for morning meeting to look over the previous day or day's information. This is going to allow us to make sure all the documentation that we needed was done. And if not, then we're able to figure out who didn't do what and get it corrected as soon as possible. The first report we're going to look at is the facility activity report, or the 24-hour report, whatever you want to call it. We're going to find all these reports under our facility tab. We'll go down to reports. And the facility activity report is located in the miscellaneous category, and it's the first one that we see, facility activity report. Come down to the bottom and click next. Our start date, I want to run these back so that they match our reports that I have. But what we're looking at here, our end date would be today, and the start date would be the previous day. As far as this goes, with choose from the following to display in the report, it is our best bet, and it's easiest just to select all. That way we're not missing anything important, and we just see all the information that was put in for the previous 24 hours. Include lines for additional notes. We encourage the nurses to use this. That way they can just write down stuff throughout their shift for each resident. For management, if you want it, you can have it. If not, don't worry about it. Residents, we don't need to pick if we are just selecting a unit or the entire building. Right here we have the option to exclude residents with no changes. So this would remove anyone from the report that had no documentation that falls under any of these categories within the past 24 hours. This would definitely shorten your report, so it is an option if you want to use it. Include our discharged residents, include our outpatients, show outpatients only. Sort by, we can go alphabetically by last name with all the residents, or we can look at unit, room, and bed for the sorting. And then by clicking report, we would get something that looks like this. Now what we can see here, here's our first resident. And if we look, here's an open event. So if we look at the information for that event, which again is our hot charting, it says that the status is complete. So that just means that when the event was created, when they went into the view and the update, they answered all the questions that we needed, they saved it, and they completed it. That's what we want to see in the status column, is complete. Over here to the right, we're going to see what type of event it is, what the description of that event is, and then whether or not it is open or closed. So closed right now tells me that management sometime within these past 24 hours closed this hot charting. So it's no longer triggering for the nurses to document on. You as managers are the only ones who have the ability to close hot charting. So this is a good way for you to daily check on all the hot charting in your building and determine whether or not things need to stay open to continue charting or if they are okay to be closed. Observations that are incomplete. Now this one says complete in the status, but what it's going to show is anything that was at one point incomplete within the past 24 hours. So this one's complete. It's good. We don't have to worry about that one. We're going to see all the orders that were put in for residents. This is huge as well. So you can look at in your facility activity report, include these orders, and then you can see everything that the nurses put in order-wise for these residents on a daily basis. Their progress notes. Here are the additional lines that I was talking about. Looking down through the next resident, I see this observation is in progress, but I see it's a pain review that's due by 1:30. So there's a reason it's in progress. They still have time to finish this. If I go up a box, I skipped over this, I apologize. Events that are open, so both are complete, which is good. Hot charting and then a non-pressure wound. This is for Medicare, and that's for a right great toe, and both of them are currently open. So that would mean your nurses are being triggered to document on these. Now the non-pressure wound skin evaluation, that may just be handled by your wound nurse. So that would be an understanding that we have. Again, progress notes. This one right here, showing up on the report. Again, our dates on this report are January 24th through January 25th. If I look, this observation was created on December 28th, 2015. It's still in progress, which means it has not been completed. And it was 72-hour admission shift charting, which this resident was a new resident at that point. So one of two things have happened here. Either the nurse that created this did not fill out the assessment properly, so it's still hanging out, or they answered all the questions properly, they just did not hit complete once they were done with the assessment. So at this point, I would go back and I would look at this one specifically, see where it's at, and then talk to this nurse in regards to making it complete. The next report we're going to talk about is your point of care compliance report. So you're going to have a point of care section here in your reports, and in this case, it's right there in the middle, point of care compliance. By hitting next, I would look at my start date, my end date. So again, I'm going to go back to when I actually ran and saved these reports. So point of care compliance, I just want to look at the previous day. POC MDS category list, we want to select all. Task category list, we want to select all. Vitals category list, we want to select all. POC care needs sign off, we would want to look at all shifts, all units. Questions to include, the incomplete questions only, that's what we want to focus on right now. Sort by room and bed or resident name. And then the print output, we're going to leave at the detail and summary. We would come over here and click report, and we would get something that looks like this. So on the 25th, we can see right here, it's evening shift. Here's our resident, current unit, room and bed, the category for anything that was missing. And then if we look over here, questions that are incomplete, and this would then list all of the questions that have yet to be answered for each resident. So your nurses, your charge nurses on the floor should be running this report at the end of their shifts. Now, during a previous video, when I was doing reports for charge nurses, I told them to run this. I would give myself at least an hour before the end of the shift. That way, if this report did come up with all these questions that have yet to be answered, I would have time to give this report then to my CNA and tell them that all of this needs documented on before the end of the shift. So here are your questions that have not been answered yet, and we keep going down. You'll notice that here's a new resident. Again, all their questions that have not been answered. New resident, questions, and so on. The next report we're going to look at is the EMAR report. So if you are using EMAR, we want to check the administration compliance every single day. Your nurses on the floor are going to be running, or should be running, their compliance report at the end of their shift every single day. That compliance report is going to show them whether or not there are any holes in the MAR that happened during their shift. So the first thing that we see in EMAR, we have administration compliance, which is what we're going to look at. But just taking a look at the other ones real quick, we have the facility administration history. This would be your electronic MAR. So if any outside agency was wanting to see your electronic MAR, we could go here for this. By running it under the facility tab like we are right now, we would be able to run like an entire unit at a time. I know in most cases it's very resident specific, so you have this same option under the resident reports once you select a resident. In the PRN administration history, we would be able to look at all the PRNs that were given for the building, why they were given, things like that. We are going to look at the administration compliance. So the start date and the end date. The end date's always going to be today. The start date in most cases is going to be today as well. So if I'm day shift, my start date and end date are going to be today. Evening shift, same deal. Night shift, my start date would be when my shift started. My end date would be when my shift ended. So that would be a case where these dates would be different. We don't need to pick residents. We can just look at units. We definitely want to look at the missed administrations. Near misses are going to show us anything that's currently late. Incomplete tasks. So this would be any PRN follow-ups that they did not complete, or it could be tasks in orders, such as heart rate, results of an AccuCheck, the units, the side MD notified, any of those tasks this would show if they had not answered them. The PRN in process What that is going to show you is any PRN in EMAR that was given a reason, or the nurse answered the task as to why they're giving it, but they did not confirm and save the PRN. Therefore, the computer is saying that PRN was never given. So a PRN in process is important because if the nurse waits too long, then we're off that schedule. We want to make sure that when we give a PRN that we do it correctly. We answer why we're giving it, and then we prep it, we confirm it, we save it. That way it registers in the computer that it's given, and we want to do that as close to the time that we did it as possible, because at that point it starts its timer for the next PRN dose. So if we got it at Q4, Q6, and we don't log it until 2 hours after we do it, well, then it just kind of affected the entire schedule thereafter as far as when you can give that PRN. So we want our nurses to do this as timely as possible and to not have PRNs that are in process. Right below, for your nurses that are working the floor, at this point, after we have them set their date and pick their unit, we just tell them to go to the very bottom, hit report, and look at it that way. And it's going to show them everything that was missed. As managers, you can get a lot more specific. So we can look at every single reason as to why something was charted as not administered. We can look at all the reasons as to why something was charted as late, early, notes that were not charted. We could look at orders that were prepped or not administered and then confirmed by a different user. So what that means is nurse A was in EMAR and they prep all their medications or orders. They walked away, they didn't save them. Nurse B comes in and then saves all the things that nurse A prepped. Those would show up in this report. Amended administrations, we can look at all the reasons why something was amended. And then if you want to, you can actually single out an individual, a user at your building, one of your nurses, and just look at everything that they have done over the course of whatever dates that you pick above. Sort by resident or unit room and bed. And then if we were to click report, we would see something like this. So with this missed administrations, here's my resident. It tells me that this is missed, and they did not sign off on a standard hip left one time x-ray. So I would need to get with this nurse, and I would have to have them amend this order and say that this was in fact done, or if it wasn't, we need to mark it as not administered and say that it wasn't done. Either way, right now this is a hole in the MAR. We look down, we have a couple more, and then this bottom one, it's an incomplete task. So they were working on the order, but what they did was, this is a fluid restriction, and what it's going to tell you over here in the administration information is that the amount with meals was answered, but they did not answer the amount between meals. So that would be an incomplete task. We would need the nurse to finish this. So anything in here that we find, we want to get a hold of the nurse that was responsible, and we want them to fix any of these. That's why we tell them to run it at the end of their shift. So if anything shows up on it, they can go in and amend those orders at that time so that things aren't hanging out for a day or multiple days. Okay. The next one we are going to look at is your BM list. So we're going to find this under the resident info, and it's the resident bowel management report. So in here, just to match my report, I'm going to jump back to the 25th. Residents, I could pick a specific resident if I wanted to, or I would probably just want to look at the entire building. Include residents regardless of bowel alert status, include acceptable ranges. What is my duration for this report? Do I want to look back 7 days or do I want to look back 14 days? And then sort by resident name or my unit room and bed. At this point, if I clicked report, I would see something like this. So what this report is going to show me are all the residents that had no BM charted for them in 3 consecutive days within this 7-day period. So if I look at the first one, Doris King, notice that my most recent date is over here to the right and it goes backwards to the left. So a little bit backwards. But notice they triggered in this report because the 19th, the 20th, and the 21st, there was nothing charted for this resident. Now, this resident may have been admitted on the 22nd, which would explain no charting on the 19th, 20th, or 21st. If we look at this report, an N means none, an M would mean medium, an L would mean large, an S would mean small. You have a place to write comments over here to the right-hand side. If we look at the next resident, Mr. Walter, I see a large, a medium, medium, medium. Whenever you see numbers in this scenario, that means that they answered the size and the volume for a residence BM. Again, we only need the size unless that resident has an ostomy. So none, and then a large, none, large, small, none, and then none, 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 which is why this resident came up on this report. So the 23rd, 24th, and 25th, no BMs that were charted on those days. At that point, I would then decide whether or not the BM protocol would need to be put into place. Your nurses are also going to be running this report at the beginning of every shift. It's up to you to make sure that they are doing that. So that way they have the information that they need to see if they need to start an intervention for any of these residents. The next report we are going to look at is the vitals report. So a lot of these vitals are being put in via the nurses, but also there are vitals that are being entered by your CNAs throughout the day. So again, resident info, just like the BM one. We see vitals report. Now in here, start date and end date. Again, as an auditing tool, I would just be looking at the past 24 hours. And I'm looking for something very specific in this. So we could look at all the vital signs for the temperature, pulse, respirations, all that good stuff, which would show us anything that was out of range, but we are also going to get those on the facility activity report. As far as intakes and outputs, what we are looking for here, especially with the intakes, we're going to be looking at all of the meals. And we want to make sure that if any resident ate less than 75% of their meal, that we offered them a meal replacement and that we documented that that meal replacement was offered. Whether or not they ate it was up to them. So in here, include acceptable ranges, details, include edits, show outpatients only. I don't want to include outpatients or discharged residents at this point. And then if I were to click report, I would see this. So I'm looking at this resident's breakfast. I would come over here and look at the fact that they ate 100% of their breakfast. Here were my fluids for breakfast. So they did a good job with this one. Lunch was 100%, and here were my fluids with lunch. Come down to the next resident, 100% for lunch. There are the fluids with lunch. 75% for their breakfast, and their fluids with breakfast. And again, I would come down here and look. So really what I'm looking for is in this percentage right here, the one on the right, I'm looking for 50% or below. And in that case, I want to make sure that supplement was offered up here and documented. Your nurses should be doing this as well. But again, this is something for you to do a follow-up to make sure that that is being done correctly. The last report that we are going to look at is going to be your observation summary report. So in our facility observation summary report, which we were going to find under the events and observations, we could set our date. So really on this one, I would go back and look for the past 7 days. And what we'll be able to do with this report specifically is look at the weekly summaries and see anybody that was missing one. There it is. Weekly summary. I could pick my entire unit. Observation status, I want to see all of them. Include notification information, include acuity, include invalid observations. I have that option. Residents without these selected observations only. So right here, I could just see the residents who did not have a weekly summary done for them in the past 7 days. Include discharge expired and outpatient residents. You could include that or take it away, either way. And if I were to click report, I would see this. So this tells me right here that Miss King did not get her weekly summary in the past week. So it tells you up here in the top right, residents without these selected observations. So again, there's Valerie. She did not get hers. Miss Cruzan did not get hers. So I could quickly look at this report and see everybody that did not get theirs. And then that way I could get with the nursing staff and make sure that these people have their weekly summaries done. Those are the reports that you need to start running daily if you're not doing it so already. Have them ready for morning meeting, run them during morning meeting, have them ready for clinical. And that way you guys can actually keep a very close eye on your building, all of its documentation that's being done or lack of documentation, and then internally figure out how to fix this, make it better and more compliant. So hopefully you guys know these reports very well already. And I will look forward to seeing you guys all in the future. Have a good one.